Good afternoon, welcome to the Tsukuba circuit in Japan for round 4 of the Core Super GT Championship, brought to you here from a very sunny Tsukuba circuit. Line up on pole position today, TNR Zegan, second place on the grid for Rebellion, and third of course for Core Veteran Plucks It Up, but more on that in just a minute. Joined alongside me today is our Core co-commentator, it's John Bowes. Thank you very much, John, for joining us this afternoon. Who's your money on for this afternoon's race?
Good evening, Luke. And yes, certainly it seems you have to look fairly blindly at the championship to not pick one of the TNR boys at the moment. They have had a very dominant streak, and in Super GT, I think Fefa is really the one to look at.
Well, definitely. In terms of the GT500 category, of course, two classes in this championship, the top band being a GT500 category. Zegan, of course, was victorious in the first round, Rebellion in the second, Zegan in round 3. So if form favours that, then perhaps Rebellion will be standing on the top step of the podium come 90 minutes from now. But as the cars down the back line up 2x2 formation, Zegan, the American driver, line up on pole position from the left-hand side, second on the grid for Rebellion, third Plucks It Up, fourth for Glenhouse, fifth for Future F1. He's finished on the podium in every race so far, but as the lights go out and we are underway here in round 4 of the Core Super GT. Great start by Zegan, looks as if he might just hold the lead. No, he's gone deep into turn number 1, he's lost all his momentum, dropped down to 4th already, which means it's going to be Rebellion who takes the lead, and they head down into turn number 4 on the final corner for the first time. Plucks It Up has managed to jump into second position with Zegan there, back up into third position, but now Glenhouse looks as if he's going to try and go through down the inside into turn number 5, through turn number 6, John. And what a great start by Rebellion, but perhaps gifted it, by Zegan mistake going into turn number 1.
Oh, I have to say, I think the guy who got the best start there was Plucks the Duck. I think Zegan definitely made a terrible mistake there, getting so wide on the brakes. I suppose he was just trying to cover himself and leave enough room on the apex for Rebellion and avoid contact. But yeah, certainly first to fourth in one corner is not a good way to start a race.
Well, definitely, Zegan, of course, leading the championship going into this race, 23 points compared to TNR Rebellion's 22 points, and with only 1 point difference between the positions, this result won't be kind of too demolishing for Zegan's championship, but he will concede the championship lead to Rebellion by the 1 point. But as we say that, Rebellion there going very wide himself coming out of turn number 5, and now he's got Core Veteran there, Plucks It Up all over the back of him, and in fact perhaps going through turn number 8 there for the second time, heading down now this long back straight before flicking the car into turn number 9, and Plucks It Up there plastered all over the rear end of TNR Rebellion as they go through turn number 9 and head on then to lap number 3 of this 90-minute encounter. Perhaps Zegan could find a way back through his diving down the inside into turn number 1. That's perhaps the most dangerous move we've seen all day, but he can't quite find a way through. Plucks It Up just being able there to defend from Zegan behind, and if Plucks It Up runs into Rebellion in front, Zegan will be there. But just as we say that, John, Plucks It Up there very sideways to turn number 4.
Yes, it certainly seems to have an advantage as far as traction goes. Not surprising given the fact that they're only turbocharged, but I see Rebellion running slightly wide there, but not losing too much ground in terms of pace. Certainly that Lexus seems to be a bit of a handful. We've seen Glenn struggle previously, but it looks as if quite Zegan has convincing now.
Well, the TNR Rebellion in his Nissan 350Z, the car has actually got 500 brake horsepower compared to the rest of the GT500 field, which only has 490 to 495 brake horsepower. But looking back at the results, this extra 5 to 10 brake horsepower doesn't seem to be making a big difference for Rebellion, because he's only won 1 race so far this season compared to Zegan's 2 race victories. Plus, of course, Rebellion's race victory coming in that partly downhill wet race at the autumn ring. So perhaps his faster car not giving him the results he desired so far.
Yeah, well, let's not forget that both Zeds have won, in fact, come 1-2 in every race so far, so perhaps it is that the car has a slight BOP advantage, as we see Jim, I believe, in GT, just having had a small accident. Or perhaps it was badly falling back, but yes, certainly GT300 the battle for second rages on as Jink and GTP Bambi fighting in the Artigara and Subaru Impreza respectively.
Well, yes, Pfeffer, of course, leading the GT300 category right now. In terms of the championship for Pfeffer, he's currently lying there in third in the championship, 5 points off the two top drivers there, Philo and Ethic, who are unfortunately not present in this afternoon's race, so we won't see a difference in there. So now this really is a sort of chance to capitalise now for Pfeffer and try and get some points on the board to try and challenge the drivers in front. And if he does finish in second, that will be 7 points for him, which will surely take the lead of that GT300 championship. But just as we're saying that, Zegan's gone off. He's gone off coming out of turn number 9, and he's dropped right down to 5th position, which is not great for Zegan really to start off this race. He needs to get up and really be challenging with Rebellion in terms of to keep this championship going. He doesn't want Rebellion to get too far ahead heading into, of course, just the final 4 rounds. This marks the halfway stage, of course, of this 8-round Super GT Championship. So not great there for Zegan. He's now dropped behind Future F1. Glenhouse, however, favouring from that. He's moved up into 3rd position, but look at that. TNR Rebellion in the Nissan 350Z, pulling away, John, from the rest of the field with only 5 minutes to go here at Tsukuba.
I think you mean an hour and 23 minutes to go, but 5 minutes gone.
What did I say? 5 minutes to go. Yeah, sorry about that. No, it's time is obviously getting the better of me today then, John. Yeah, 1 hour, 23 minutes and 17 seconds to go in this one then, to be precise. TNR Rebellion, look, flicking the car through the infield there, through turn 5, through turn number 6 now, through turn number 7, spotty braking precisely for turn number 8, a corner which can catch you out, and almost caught him out very early on in the race when Pluxaduck looks to find the momentum. However, this race now just starting to stabilise here, so it's going to be very interesting to see, John, how long TNR Rebellion can stay out there for before he has to come in and make the pit stops needed during this race, and perhaps then Plux the Duck can find the advantage during that pit stop phase. Just as we say that, there is Jink. They're currently lying in 3rd position in the GT300 category, 8th overall. Sorry about that, I've got a small cough today, so you might have to put up with that throughout the course of this afternoon's race. But there is Jink, John, coming up then towards Bambi there, currently lying in 2nd in the group, and they are quite a way behind Pfeffer, who has just put the hammer down and drove off in front in his RX-7. So he's definitely showing some strong pace here this afternoon, and definitely starting this race how he, of course, wants to go on.
Absolutely, the field does seem to have stabilised somewhat with seemingly the fastest cars just having set their order in qualifying, now just slowly pulling away. Obviously the big difference is 5 Zigan, who qualified on pole and is now last in the GT class, so to find out what he can do exactly. I imagine that the pace difference that we see between him and Future F1, that he'll be catching him soon. It was a bit of an odd accident, just because generally there's enough time to scroll up the speed, so I wonder if he had contact with Plux possibly, who was fighting closely with earlier. But yes, at this exact moment it seems that the closest battle to track is indeed GT300. We're on 2nd place in that class with Jink ever closer to GTP Bambi.
Well, the thing is, though, in this one, is Bambi, of course, cannot score points in this championship. The points, of course, for reserve drivers don't count, and the points are taken away from the series drivers. So if it stays like this, Jink will still get the 7 points for finishing in 3rd position, because Bambi's points won't count, of course, filling in for this race. So he's just doing this race for fun. The points in this one won't count for Bambi. Therefore, Jink can afford perhaps to stay in 2nd, or to stay in 3rd here this afternoon and still get those 7 points. But of course I'm thinking he'll want to try and get past Bambi and then try and close up on Pfeffer in front to try and get the maximum points here this afternoon.
Yes, certainly so far in this championship we've seen Jink have some really strong showings in terms of pace, but they've been punctuated by shall we say discrepancies in consistency, and certainly he does seem to be improving with every round that we've seen him in. and just aiming to get a little bit more reliable as he runs wide to let the GT500 leader through. Already
this will definitely be an issue. This will definitely be an issue on this track, John, is when the leaders from the GT500 class come through. Of course, there was a difference between the cars, not a bigger difference as seen, of course, in the World Endurance Championship, but the GT500 do have the faster cars here, so because the circuit is very small in comparison to some of the World Endurance tracks that we are on, we should be expecting the GT500 cars to lap probably once kind of every 7 or 8 minutes or so during this race. Therefore, around about probably about 9 or 10 kind of laps that these GT500 cars will do on the GT300 field, which therefore could cause an issue for the GT300 cars, having to get out of the way, having to stop their battles to avoid causing an incident with the GT500 cars. So perhaps that's something else to watch out for in this race. But another thing to watch out for in this race is Zegan and the Future F1 building their way back up the field. Of course, these two drivers finished on the podium every single round so far in this championship. Future F1 looking at 103rd, Zegan winning 2 of the races, and that's a bit aggressive way to get the move done there. Through turn number 8, Zegan launches the car down the inside, pushes Future F1 wide slightly. Very aggressive way to get involved there. Perhaps the stewards might want to have a word with that, but it did look would be a racing incident there. Perhaps Future F1 kind of shutting the door on Zegan slightly there, but definitely Zegan not wanting to hang around, definitely wanting to get back on with his race and try and close up now on Glenhouse in front, and then Clucks the Duck and try and close up on TNR Rebellion, who was just in front of them. Of course, there are no teams in this championship, but the two TNR boys perhaps testing with each other, quite good friends, and therefore they'll know each other's driving styles. Rebellion will know how Zegan will want to attack. Zegan will know how Rebellion will want to attack. So that could be interesting if those two come side by side again later on during the race.
Yes, indeed, it was certainly fairly elbows out. I think Zegan came quite far back in that corner, so I don't think Future particularly shut the door. But yes, certainly, I think. As we see that Jink has in fact got the best of GCP Bambi. I think he took advantage of the traffic and Bambi opting to run the outside line to let GT500 cars through. Jink just capitalised on that and followed them through the open door.
Well, what do you think is going on here then with Future F1? Of course, he finished 3rd in round 1, 3rd in round 2 and a 3rd in round 3. However, he's currently lying 5th in the timesheet stage. Do you reckon that perhaps his first 2 results, perhaps just good luck for Future F1, or do you think he's having some serious pace issues today?
Well, I think the thing we've seen from Future F1 is he does just have the ability to outlast many of his opposition. We've seen him have some reasonable performance in other rounds, but yes, certainly it seems that more often than not, he's just the guy who's there at the end who gets to pick up the silverware, compared necessarily to having run the fastest pace. And doing that through consistency is definitely a good trait, and certainly given that he's really joined the core community for this year's N24, it's a good sign for the INF team for which he competes.
Well, definitely Future F1 then showing some good pace so far in the Super GT Championship. Currently lying 5th today in the GT500 class. Of course, Clucks the Duck is there in 2nd position. Glenhouse slightly behind him. Now, Glenhouse again, he doesn't have to push either because Clucks the Duck is also a reserve driver for this afternoon's race. So therefore, he will not score points either, and Glenhouse will be awarded with the 7 points if the scores stayed like this. So do you think that Glenhouse will try and get past Clucks and try and close back up on Rebellion in front, or do you reckon 2nd position in this afternoon's race will be a good result for Glenhouse if, of course, he stays away from trouble and manages to bring the car home in this 3rd position on the road, but 2nd place in the points?
I think Glenn is definitely a very seasoned driver, and as we know, he's been a GT Academy qualifier on a couple of occasions, and I think he knows when to pick his battles really, and I think at the moment he's just out there surviving, and then towards the end of the race he'll think to himself, right, what can I do from here, rather than necessarily going all out at the moment. certainly looking forward at Plucks in identical machinery, you can see that he is really going for it, really just out for the race win, since, as we mentioned, he's not in it for the championship. He can't score championship points given his reserve driver status, so he is just trying to catch Rebellion at all costs and really sort of put his mark on this race.
Could that add a slight kind of danger perhaps to his driving, because Plucks doesn't really care whether he finishes this race or not, because he's a reserve driver, he won't score points. Could that perhaps present a danger to the GT300 drivers when he's lapping them, because he's not going to wait around because he needs the points, he's just going to go for it, he's going to go for the moves to try and get past the back markers? And could that perhaps present kind of the that bonus bit of danger for these GT300 drivers, knowing that Plucks is there behind them, knowing that he is going to want to get past quicker than the series drivers, because he's not got something to lose in that respect. He can just go flat out and not lose something in this race by finishing the race or by not finishing the race. He's got nothing to lose, he can go for it, and he could perhaps cause some danger to the drivers out there on the circuit as well.
I wouldn't say so. I think Plucks is definitely the kind of driver who has a level of pride in what he does, and that, as you mentioned, sort of driving in a dangerous nature isn't really sort of his forte, and certainly I think that he's got the sort of common sense to know that doing so would be a one-way ticket to not being invited back, and so yeah, I don't think that's a particular risk.
Well, of course, as well, coming into a series like this and doing the reserve race will be helpful for him. Of course, taking part in the Core VLN and, of course, later the Core Nürburgring 24 hours. So by doing these events, he's gaining the track time he can have. He's gaining the time with the game. He's gaining the time driving with these competitors and really be able to kind of suss out their skills in that industry. But as we're saying, there's Future F1 again now getting very aggressive to Zegon. Future F1 has now got back past Zygon. Of course, Zygon getting aggressive with him right here, a few laps to go at turn number 8, and now Zegon tries to run him wide through turn number 8, but Future F1 will get the power down early coming out of turn number 8, down that back straight, and Zegon has been able, however, it appears to hold on to full position, but diving into the pit lane. Is this for his first scheduled stop, or has he sustained some damage with that side-by-side battle there with Future F1, John?
It's hard to be sure. We have seen the Zeds often pitting a lot more frequently than many of the other GT500 cars, so it's possible. But yes, certainly it seemed that, I don't know how Zegon lost the position, since it seemed like he really had the pace advantage, but certainly at this moment in time I would assume that he made a mistake that allowed Future to get back past. And yes, we saw Future really sort of elbows out in terms of his defence then, and so I imagine that damage isn't impossible. But as we say that, Glenn Owl's now coming into the pit lane as well, so perhaps shorter stints is the order of the day.
Well, definitely. In terms of the incident there with Zygon and Future F1, both drivers showing aggression to one another. Zygon, of course, tried to run out Future F1 a few laps ago and came from nowhere to drive it down the inside, so perhaps now then Future F1 kind of giving his own back, showing his comeback, showing he's not going to be a push around throughout this race. But in my eyes, Future F1 appeared to be a bit more aggressive than Zegon. However, we didn't see the whole of the incident, so we can't quite comment on kind of exactly what happened as Glenhouse comes out now alongside Pfeffer, of course. Pfeffer, the current leader in the lower category, the GT300 category. Glenhouse himself there running quite well today, but it's so far we've seen pit stops then from Zegon and Glenhouse, so Future F1 would of course drop down back into fourth position, but the two leaders in that one, TNR Rebellion and Plucks the Duck, still not having come into the pits, and no one coming to the pits so far from the GT300 category. So are they perhaps running different strategies between the classes?
Well, the nature of GT300 in that they have fairly similar levels of grip but just less power than the GT500 cars does mean that they tend to be able to run longer stints. Obviously, tyre wear in this game is reasonably closely tied to the amount of power that your car uses, so as we see in WEC, the LMPs rarely run longer than 20-minute stints, and yet in GT racing we see half-an-hour stints a lot more common. So certainly the GT500 grid tends to run a little bit shorter than GT300 grid.
Well, and as they make their way around turn number 4 now, there is TNR Rebellion, the Swiss driver, currently in the lead of this one. Second place is Pluxer Duckley, core veteran there, taking part in this one for a reserve driver who is not part of the series and therefore cannot score points. Also not scoring points today is Cobra, who's currently running bottom of the GT300 class there in 9th position overall, and also not being able to score points today, GTP Bambi, who's 1 place above Cobra there in 8th overall, and of course running 3rd in GT300 category. 3rd position overall there for Future F1, but just as we're saying that, John, the leader, TNR Rebellion, the Swiss driver in the Nissan 350Z, coming down pit lane for his first scheduled stop of the afternoon.
Indeed, and we've just seen Plux go past him, and I think that Future F1 will manage to take him as well. Seemingly the exceptionally sort of high-loading layout of this track, where cars are on, or specifically sort of right-hand lock a lot of the time, and in fairly highly sustained corners, by which I mean that they're fast, but also that you stay on the lock for a long time. It's clearly taking the worst out of the tyres, and that means that they're running shorter stints than we usually see.
Well, could we perhaps see Pluxer Duck and Future F1 doing a different strategy that the 3 remaining GT500 drivers perhaps not doing? You know, Pluxer's got nothing to lose here, so perhaps by going on to a different strategy and trying to go further in the race and maybe cut a pit stop out might be the only way today that he can catch TNR Rebellion in front, who has the pace here this afternoon.
Yes, indeed, and obviously it also depends on driving styles, but it is, as we've seen previously, possible that if you're not having battles, that you can really get the best out of the tyres and yet still keep the most of your pace. And possibly the reason that we've not seen Plux battling at the front is that he was just nursing his tyres just that little bit so he can run slightly further into the race and get that pit stop back, as you said.
Well, definitely. There is Future F1 currently lying 2nd position in this race. He is, though, however, about to take the lead, it appears, because Pluxer Duck, who we were just saying could perhaps be going longer in the race, in the pit lane just 1 lap after the race leader on aggregate, if you want to say, TNR Rebellion, before the drivers make their pit stop. So Future F1 goes past, now drives into the lead of the race. Now, there we go, he's up into the lead of the race, and now TNR Rebellion goes through as well. Now, that gap isn't that big between Rebellion and Future F1, so perhaps we could see a difference there on track. Future F1, of course, still having to make his pit stop, will fall back into 4th position, we're expecting, after the pit stops, but Segan, of course, being on the fresh rubber, might perhaps have a chance to catch up and pass Future F1 then the round of pit stops. There, Pluxer Duck and Glenhouse getting very close as well. That is the battle for 2nd overall. Now, before the pit stops, John, Plux was further ahead than that compared to Glenhouse, so perhaps Plux losing out by staying out just slightly longer during that first stint.
Well, that's the nature of staying out, isn't it? Obviously you gain more than undercut by doing shorter stints, but the trade-off is that you then have to make more stops. So obviously it's down to driver preference and what they prefer, but I think the more important factor is that it's just begun raining, and Future F1 is currently the only car that hasn't used a pit stop so far. So perhaps this is actually playing straight into the American driver's hands, since he hasn't lost what is effectively a 30-second deficit that he'll have to take when he pits, and perhaps he's just trying to hold out for the rain.
However, John, the longer he stays out for, the more damage he'll do to his tyres, meaning the slower lap times he will theoretically do, and the rain's not coming down too hard yet, because then if you look in the top left-hand corner, the track water level is still on 0%, so it's not even wet enough for intermediates, let alone full wets yet. So perhaps this Future F1 not called this correctly, and just as we say that, he has now dropped past 2nd place, TNR Rebellion into the lead of the race, with a pit stop under his belt, with Future F1 still having to make his stop. However, if this rain comes back harder now in the next 4 or 5 minutes, then Future F1 will definitely be in the driving seat. However, the longer he stays out now, the more time he'll lose to the cars, and could he perhaps be staying out sort of too long and then risk causing more damage than if he just stops now and puts on some slick tyres for the time being.
Yes, it's always a difficult trade-off. The biggest problem I think he's got at the moment is that we've seen in quite a few races, as we look back up the straight and see a huge gaggle of cars approaching, as we've got what looks like a three-way battle for third now in GT500 forming. But yes, what we've seen previously is that while the rain does come down with seemingly no effect on the surface water gauge, that suddenly we'll get the massive change over the course of a couple of laps. So perhaps while it seems that future F1 is now just burning time, perhaps he is just waiting out from experience and just saying, I'm going to stick it out, just because worst comes to worst, as we've said, he was going to come out towards the bottom end of this field anyway, and to be honest, as long as he doesn't go over the hot end, I think that he's probably in a good position as far as strategy goes, just because we've got two TNR guys in the juniors hitting on or around and then Flux and Glenn waiting out to slightly closer to the 2 minutes. So I think that if stays out to half an hour, again, it's not or possibly 2 minutes.
Well, definitely interesting to see if he can say that. Of course, he's only got about 5 minutes until he can perhaps be doing it, so if he perhaps jumps a pit stop, he will be in the driving seat. However, future F1 now looks just up the road to Glenelg's 81 and there was Zegan as well. So now even if future stop now, they will drop way behind Zegan, who he was battling before the pit stop phase. And now perhaps we sense the GT500 battle closing up between 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th. Future F1 just down the road. And all this of course is allowing TNR Rebellion to just drive off in front, and he hasn't had a worry to think about so far. He's dominated this race right from the first corner, and so far appears Tim the race win here this afternoon, emulating the success of the Awesome Wing in round 2, which was of course also taking place in the race. Perhaps he can come and see the GT Wayne Master, just because they're like Glenelg's now line up the move on Flux and Duck going into turn number 8. He dives the car into the inside, which he does a few times, but Flux always thinks to hold him off, but this time it appears Glenelg has made the move stick. Oh no, this is not the future F1 show. So now he drops down into the pit lane, he goes. Now, do you reckon he's called it too late or too early? This will be very interesting to see. Has he called it too late for first in, or too early to call it his second stop sort of thing? Zegan now going around the outside of Flux the Duck and Glenelg. He can't quite make that one stick, and now Flux the Duck trying to come back on Glenelg as well. 3 cars here battling for second place in the GT500 category. Make sure you don't take each other off, boys, and Flux the Duck very sideways coming out of turn number 4 into turn number 5 now, and look, they've got cars ahead as well. Look, Cobra, get out of the way, and now he's got Bambi in front as well, so all cars here all over the place in the pits. Glenelg's heading down the inside, Zygon is up the inside of Flux the Duck, he's through into 3rd position now to try and close up on Glenelg's in front. So Zygon now is making a comeback in this one. 3 cars for the 2nd place battle in the GT500 category, John, all separated by about 0.4 of a second.
Yes, it certainly is intense stuff. As ever, traffic playing that tiniest little distraction, and I think that possibly a small amount of indecision from Flux, or possibly just knowledge that 5-Ziggin really does love those ballsy late on the brake moves into that corner, meant that he just didn't really defend particularly hard against the GT3 500 championship leader at this moment in time. But certainly it seems that 5-Ziggin is really on the charge to try and get back up there. As you mentioned earlier, I think after the first corner, Rebellion has really had this race to lose at the moment. So certainly, definitely in his hands as we speak.
Oh, and now it comes Ziggin again. He's made a move from nowhere and managed to pull it off into 2nd position in this GT500 battle. But what, John, do you make of the future F1 pit stop? Has he finally succumbed there and come into the pit lane, or has his strategy sort of worked?
Well, I don't know if you noticed then, but we had the surface water meter just flickering up slightly then. It seems to have returned to 0 but given the fact that it looks as if the rain is getting ever heavier, I think Future F1 may have left it too late and now will have had to go back onto slicks. It has indeed jumped up to 3% now in seemingly no time at all. That Future F1 has indeed made a strategy mistake here, because he's just changed onto slicks, so we'll have to be going back into the pit soon anyway to get some wet weather tyres if the rain continues.
Exactly, he's going to go onto slick tyres to then come back in again in about 2 or 3 laps time to pit for wet with the rest of the field. Right, John, look back again.
I think we've just seen Glenelg's run off the track there in turn 9.
Yes, he's lost it. He's dropped down to 4th position, which means the battle now for second is now just between the 2 cars with Ziegen and Pluxer Duck. Was there contact, John? Could you quite see it, or did he just run off by himself?
I did miss it. I believe that there was enough space between these guys that he probably just made an error. We did see him on the previous lap where Ziegen made that move, him struggling offline, and as we know, as we see Ziegen running off there, and
Ziegen's gone off as well. Pluxer Duck there has gone through into 2nd position. So, right, remember back to June time with the World Endurance Championship when it went to Silverstone. We had a very similar incident than this. The track was wetting at a considerable rate, but the cars were all on slick tyres, and we had cars darting around left, right and centre. And as we're saying this, John, Ziegen and Glenelg both dived into the pit lane, I'm presuming for wet tyres, unless they've sustained some damage in their kind of periods off the race circuit. But if they come in for wet tyres, then in theory they'll be the fastest ones on the track and could perhaps hunt down Pluxer Duck and TNR Rebellion, who are staying out. But is the track wet enough for wet tyres with just 14% wet level surface on the track?
Well, one of the things to remember is the mechanics in GT6 mean that there is a reasonable amount of grip online for slick tyres up until about 33%, or at least on racing softs, but then offline there's suddenly very little grip at all, as we see the 1st and 2nd place cars in GT500 and I believe all of the GT300 grid coming in. So yeah, certainly I think everyone's made the decision now that sort of keeping to the lines and maintaining racing speed is just too difficult at this moment in time, so intermediates are the way to go.
But will this now leave Ziegen with an advantage slightly, because he's had the chance to warm up those tyres, so these cars coming out now will be cold on his first lap compared to Ziegen and Glenelg, who came in 1 lap earlier, or has that lap not perhaps made too much an impact on Pluxer Duck and TNR Rebellion in 1st and 2nd?
They do seem to close up slightly, as we see Plux getting very leery on his new tyres, and we do indeed see Ziegen in the background there. Future F1, I think, is still quite close to Ziegen and is on slicks at this moment in time, as far as I can tell. Though it's possible that he played a master stroke and actually managed to switch to intermediates. We'll have to wait and see if he pulls into the pits anytime soon.
Well,
but
definitely,
yes,
he definitely seems to be holding pace with Ziegen. He doesn't seem to be losing much with the wet conditions or flying off the circuit. So if Future F1 has gambled, then the gamble has definitely paid off. And now it appears we've got once again, the battle for 2nd, 3rd and 4th between 3 drivers, all the length of 1 pit straight here at the Tsukuba circuit for round 4 of the Super GT. Whoa! Everyone's gone. Everyone's gone flying. We've got Ziegen off, we've got Future F1 off, it appears. They all spun, it seems, coming out of turn number 1, John. And it seemed Pfeffer was in the middle of it all.
I think what we actually saw was we see Pfeffer spinning Ziegen around, it seems. So I don't know if these 2 drivers just can't see each other, which is a bug that we've seen previously, but certainly that was somewhat interesting. But I believe that it was just that Pfeffer lost it on the exit of turn 1. And ended up sort of in the middle of a large group of cars, and they just couldn't get around him.
Because the gaggle of cars was so big, and because the track is so tight in places, 1 car spinning could lead to 3 or 4 getting impacted. And just as we saw there, it appears Ziegen coming off the worst in that one, being spun 2, 3 or 4 times, about 2 or 3 times. So not quite there then for Ziegen. Future F1 back into the pit lane from 2nd position in the GT500 class. So now perhaps this is his pit stop for intermediates, John. I
believe so. Strangely, I think we've just lost Pluxer Duck. we've heard he has had struggles with internet connection previously, so I imagine that's what's happened, as we see Ziggin following Future F1 into the pits, but fairly delayed as the HSV has just left. So really not Ziggin's race today.
Well no, so Ziggin's not going to gain his third win of the championship. Plucks a duck, of course, in his Lexus SC430, no longer part of the field it seems. Into the pits comes Rebellion. Now what's all this about? Because he's already made his pit stop, which will put Glenhouse in the lead of the race. What's going on, John?
Given how wet the track is becoming and how quickly, I can only imagine he's going on to full wets from intermediate tyres. Certainly GTP Bambi, we've just seen go past, has managed to climb the lead of the Super GT 300 class, so the four-wheel drive in that Impreza really allowing him to go further than many of the other cars, it seems.
Well, yeah, of course, the four-wheel drive in that Subaru differing from the rest of the field, who take part with the rear-wheel drive cars. Pfeffer in the pit lane as well. He caused, of course, that multi-car pile-up just a few laps ago. Perhaps that's damage sustained in that crash, because he looked as if he was limping home. But of course, this could provide an advantage for him now, being able to change onto those full wet tyres. And look at Glenhouse, he's sliding all over the place, coming through turn 7 and through turn number 8. The intermediates have definitely packed up, and look, John, the surface level of water there, 67% now, as TNR Rebellion with the full wet close behind.
Yes, this is definitely full wet conditions. It may be possible, since we saw Glenn struggling more than the others, that the Scottish driver has in fact just gone directly onto full wets, as we see him staying out there and TNR getting equally sideways behind him.
Well,
so it's possible he played a bit of a master stroke and has now inherited the race of the lead because, the lead of the race because of it.
Well, definitely, however, doesn't seem to be too comfortable with these wet conditions here this afternoon. He's sliding all over the place. The surface water level now just jumped up dramatically from 66 now to 77%, so it's definitely getting proper wet out there, full on wet out there, and perhaps these drivers cannot quite control their Super GT machines. And if we say that, Glenn Bowes sideways coming out of turn number 7, and he gifts the race lead to TNR Rebellion, the Swiss driver, who inherits the race lead here with still 52 minutes to go, but both still sliding coming out of turn number 8. And in fact now Glenhouse right behind TNR Rebellion, both cars very slippery coming out of turn number 8. Now Glenhouse pulls into the pit lane, so perhaps, John, he was on intermediates and is now heading onto the full wet tyre. What's going on behind him? Future F1 there in 3rd position, with Ziggin there in 4th. So Future F1 now will move up into 2nd, but he's lost it himself coming out of turn number 9 and onto the start-finish line. Not called the Super GTs. This might as well just be called Rallycross. They're slipping all over the slippery surface here at the Tsukuba circuit, and it almost led there to Future F1's demise as he slid across the start-finish straight. So Glenhouse now will come back out in 3rd position. Ziggin, of course, recovering from that multi-car pile-up that he was involved in about 5 minutes ago there, currently lying in 4th position. Bambi currently leading in the GT300 category. Jink there currently in 2nd place in that one, but Pfeffer, who was leading just 15 minutes ago in the GT300 category, currently stone dead last after causing the impact a few laps ago, and he now pulls off into the pits himself, perhaps changing onto those full wet tyres as the surface water level hits 99%.
Yes, indeed. It's important to remember that since these cars rely so... we see Future F1 second in GT500 slamming into the pit wall out turn 9. So I'd be amazed if he's got away without damage there. But as I was saying, with the cars so reliant on downforce for their grip and setup, suddenly reducing the speed at which they can go around corners, like in the rain, drastically exponentially reduces it due to the fact that they then can't produce the downforce. So they've suddenly got very little grip after having been set up for having effectively a lot of grip.
Well, definitely, and as we look now at Future F1, they're in 2nd place. Look, he's sliding himself there coming out of turn number 6 and turn number 7. Getting onto the wet grass, that's not going to do your car too much good. He has pulled out kind of a bit of a gap though now, with Glenhouse pitting just a few laps ago, so he's pulled out kind of that comfort zone. between himself and Glenhouse, but TNR Rebellion has still just shot off in front, leading this race overall and in the GT500 category, and looks on course, John, to take his second win of the season, of course, mirroring his success at the Autumn Ring, which was also run in the rain.
Yes, it was definitely a convoluted race, that, where we saw Ziggin actually leading for most of it, but then as the wet weather came in, it did seem that Rebellion had the advantage, but we did see both cars seesaw back and forth for the lead. So it's hard to be sure if it was just superior skill by TNR Rebellion in the wet, or if it's just that he happened to be the guy leading at the time. Certainly it did seem that towards the very end that the conditions did just get the best of 5 Ziggin, since he did end up almost a lap down, but certainly it was hectic for both drivers, I think is probably the best way to describe it.
Well, definitely, in these monsoon conditions here this afternoon at the Tsukuba circuit, all the cars sliding around the circuit, they're still not comfortable, even with the full wet tyres on, as Rebellion comes round to lap Jink. He's currently lying second in the GT300 category. Of course, there is a difference in speed between these classes. Of course, the GT300 category slower than the GT500 category. Not the difference seen, of course, in the World Endurance Championship for regular core viewers. However, there is still a big difference in speed between these cars. Lap number 45 here at the Tsukuba circuit, heading up almost to the halfway period in this race. TNR Rebellion leading the American driver, currently in the lead of this one in the GT500 category in his Nissan 350Z. Second position, however, for Future F1 competing in his Honda HSV car, so he's currently lying there in second position, quite a distance, however, way back from TNR Rebellion, who's been dominant right from the word go in this one, after inheriting the lead on the first corner, on the first lap, after a small Ziggin mistake. Third position in this race for core veteran so far, takes part in almost every core event. It's Glenhouse 81 there, currently lying in third position in his Lexus SC430. Of course, the other Lexus was piloted by Plux the Duck, the reserve driver for this race, who unfortunately suffered some disconnection issues and is no longer part of the foray. Fourth position for double series race winner TNR Ziggin, of course, won the race in the first round, won the race in the third round last time out in Tokyo by a massive gap, 1 minute 30 seconds over, funny enough, TNR Rebellion. And I said it right at the start, the results seem to zigzag. Ziggin winning race 1, Ziggin winning race 3 in the championship, with Rebellion winning race 2. So if form favours it here this afternoon, then Rebellion will go on to take victory. He is currently leading the way in that one. So that rounds out then the GT500 class. In the GT300 class, Bambi seems to have inherited the lead in that one, currently lying in 5th position himself in the 4-wheel drive Subaru Impreza, which is really coming to its own during the wet stages of this race. Didn't have too much success during the first half an hour, but when the rain fell, his Subaru really coming into its own, proving the difference against the rear-wheel drive cars here in this afternoon's race. So Bambi, of course, he won't be able, however, to score points in this round, being the reserve driver, so that's a bit unfortunate for him in that one. There is Jink. He is currently lying in 6th position in his R2G car, currently lying there 6th overall, 2nd in the GT300 class. He gets very sideways through turn 6, very sideways through turn number 7, smashes against the wall, so perhaps some heavy damage there sustained for Jink in that one. But he's so far had a good run, currently lying in 2nd position, and then got Cobra, also a reserve driver there, 3rd in the GT300 category. But Pfeffer, who was leading very early on in the GT300 category, looks to be on course to take victory in that one. Of course, Pfeffer winning last time out in Tokyo, managed to pull off a 2nd in the first round of the championship. So Pfeffer used to success in this championship. There he is now on circuit. He is currently there lying 4th position overall in the GT500, well now 3rd now in the GT300 category after Cobra spin, but he just had his own moment of himself there going through turn number 7. So Cobra, it looks, will go back past both of these drivers, not having the best run today, perhaps not quite used to the wet Tsukuba conditions, both of them being caught out during the spray here this afternoon. Back over to you, John.
Yes, indeed, those two don't seem to be having the best luck, as we see GTP Bambi, the class leader, now set to lap them. So the four-wheel drive Impreza are really coming into its own in these conditions, unlike in the dry where it seems to be struggling slightly for pace. It is amazing how much difference the conditions can make as far as the style that you have to adopt to be fast, and it is incredible to see the difference that is brought as far as cars that you thought would be race winners and cars that you thought would be nowhere. Suddenly the wet comes and it's completely reversed. That's why I think in endurance racing the famous saying rain is the great leveller.
Well, definitely, because we wouldn't have expected Bambi to be on top of the GT3 underclass, and we definitely wouldn't have expected to see Zig in there battling to stay in 4th position, or battling to try and get on a podium in this afternoon's race. There was Zig, and he's all over the place, sliding again there through turn number 1. But looking back at the GT3 underclass, Bambi can't score points in this one due to his reserve driver status, meaning Jink will inherit himself the full 8 points in this race for being the highest scoring series driver. So Jink there inheriting the full 8 points. That will be the first time he's finished on a podium all series. He didn't finish in the top 3 at either round 1, round 2 or round 3. So Jink perhaps showing some good promise here this afternoon at the Tsukuba circuit, and perhaps this could be a new chapter for Jink to try and push on for higher results in the second half of the Super GT powered by Core series.
Well, I said it at the top of the or near the top of the program. He does seem to be the driver who's gaining the most race on race. So I think well-deserved position at this current time, and certainly I think towards the end of the championship we'll be seeing him fighting for podiums a lot more.
Well, definitely. So it will definitely be interesting to see how Jink can develop as a driver throughout the Super GT Championship, and perhaps challenge for those podiums or even raise victories in the GT3 under category as the season progresses. Of course, we've still got 4 rounds to go after this. Or the end of this race will mark the halfway stage of the championship, the Super GT Championship, currently being led in the GT 500 class by TNR Ziggin by the 1 point over TNR Rebellion there, 23 points to Rebellion's 22 points. However, the victory here today, when looking at those standings, Rebellion will get himself the 8 points. Future F1 and Glenhouse, they're both series drivers, meaning that will be 5 points to Ziggin, meaning looking at that, Rebellion will lead the championship by 2 points heading into round number 5. So a great result here then for Rebellion if the table here stays this way. So definitely what Rebellion would have wanted. It's like Christmas has come early for him, or late in this instance, as Rebellion are seemingly there on course for victory this afternoon, and victory to take the championship lead here this afternoon.
Yes, indeed. This is, well, certainly the way the championship points go, is that as long as you can keep in the race and keep sort of relatively near the front, it's very hard to actually gain on your opposition. But certainly the moment that you actually one of your cars you're competing against misses a race, or indeed has a very poor result, as we see Rebellion pitting and giving Future F1 the lead in the race. But yes, certainly this is a gift for Rebellion at this moment in time. Although having said that, he's now dropped into 3rd, only a single position ahead of 5 Ziggin.
Well, here we go then, as we look at that pit stop. TNR Rebellion in the pit lane. This is perhaps his 2nd strategic stop now, so we should expect after this perhaps 1 more stop if the drive is pitting every 20 minutes or so. So a 3-stop strategy in this one. It'll be interesting to see if Future F1 goes the distance and try and cut the pit stop out, or if he continues himself, currently leading this race from Glenhouse there in 2nd position. TNR Rebellion, however, has dominated this race right from the opening corner, right from the first lap, and we should expect to see him retake the lead as Glenhouse having a spin, it seems, coming out of turn number 7. That definitely seems to be a hot spot here, John, for drivers to lose it. It's coming out of turn number 6 and 7. Definitely not really a corner in the dry, but it's proving to be really damage these drivers so far in this one. We've also got a car spinning there at turn number 9. He's just recovered, as we can see on the driver tracker. But what is it about turn number 6 and turn number 7 that seems to be causing the drivers these problems today then, John?
Well, I think high-speed corners are always challenging in the wet, especially high-speed corners where you're accelerating a lot. due to the fact that this is such a slow circuit, in effect, it means that you're accelerating at pretty much every single point that you're not in a braking zone. Or on tracks like, say, the Nürburgring, where you spend a lot of time closer to the Vmax of the car, it means that the car's a lot more stable than when you're accelerating in it. And certainly a corner where there's just enough turn to sort of break traction, it means it's very hard to catch the car then. And I think that's why we're seeing so many mistakes coming from these high-speed corners.
Well, definitely, and just looking there then, John, the weather radar dropped from 100% to 99%, so could perhaps the conditions be clearing, which could fall back into the hands of Pfeffer and co in the GT300 class, because Bambi didn't look too confident in the dry, so perhaps if the weather does clear, can Bambi in the four-wheel drive Subaru Impreza hold on to victory here this afternoon?
Well, while his pace wasn't as fantastic as it could have been, it's important to remember that he was actually not losing enormous amounts of time, and at this, or I think right now, he's actually got a lap lead on pretty much every single Super GT 300 car, as he has in fact just, or I believe he's just passed Jink. He may be having a small tussle there, but certainly given that Jink is in second place and that Bambi has just passed him, the only thing to really get from that is that the rest of the field is indeed a lap down.
Well, definitely. So GTP Bambi there, definitely the one to watch in this one. With only 38 minutes of this race to go, then even if the conditions do clear, he has the advantage. He has that ground behind him to perhaps not be caught for a very, very long time indeed. And when he does get caught, the race will be pretty much finished by that point, regardless. Anyway, sorry, hang on. Pfeffer there in the pit lane for 8th position. He's not had the best race either, kind of like in 8th position, so not great for him in that one. Rebellion there back into the pit lane in 4th position, so perhaps this is his final stop. In fact, no, we just had Rebellion in the pit lane, so what's this one then, John?
Did we just have Rebellion in the pit lane? I thought we just had 5 Ziggin in the pit lane.
Was it? Oh, they're both called TNR, aren't they? So you sometimes get confused by it. But if you look behind, Rebellion is now currently line 4th in the GT500 category. But then if Ziggin's pitted, then Ziggin can't have jumped Rebellion during that pit stop.
In fact, yes, you may be right. Sorry, I got my order mixed up. I guess I'm too used to looking at Ziggin as being the leading of these two. But yes, I think you may actually be right, and Rebellion has had a second stop. Obviously, I think that's probably due to damage more than any other factor at this moment in time. Certainly, you alluded to cars needing to stick to 20 minutes, but that actually goes out the window when they switch onto wet tyres, just because the lower temperature they run at, it means that the cars suddenly switch from being very heavily tyre limited and only getting through about half a tank per stint on the tyres, to suddenly being entirely fuel limited with the tyres offering plenty of grip throughout the stint. So the endurance per stint suddenly goes from about 20 minutes to just under an hour in most cases. So yeah, I believe from where they were, most of the cars will only need one stop more so long as the conditions don't change.
Well, if Rebellion's just pitted twice in the space of 5 minutes, does that then mean he might have lost a race lead to Glenhouse 81?
I don't entirely understand the question.
Okay, so if Rebellion's been in the pit lane twice in about 5 minutes, because I swear he came into the pit lane twice, and Glenhouse weren't too far behind him when the last round of pit stops came, does that mean that Glenhouse may have in theory inherited the race lead?
Well, I would assume that Future F1 would have stayed in the race lead, but yeah, I certainly think that those two stops that close together will have cost Rebellion heavily. As far as I can tell, the only car likely to lose out to him if he goes for a further stop is 5 Ziggin, so I think Future F1 and Glenn are relatively safe so long as they can avoid any further mishap.
Well, definitely, it'll be interesting to see how this all develops heading into the last 15 or so minutes of this race, and which drivers will end up on top here this afternoon. Has the strategy paid off for future F1? Has he been able to keep that on track and do the laps needed to close back up to the drivers after his pit stop kind of strategy error during the first half an hour of this race? Zigan there had a very poor getaway from the line, dropped down to 3rd or 4th in the opening lap from pole position, plus was involved in a multi-car pile-up about half an hour ago. So it'll be interesting to see where Zigan can end up this afternoon, if he can jump back up and perhaps challenge for the race win. The favourite here this afternoon, TNR Rebellion, who looked on course to take victory, had just done 2 stops in the space of 5 minutes, so perhaps there is some issues with the Nissan 350Z there, snaking again down the straight through turns 2, 3 and 4. The turn 4, the hairpin now, and Pfeffer's been in the pit lane for quite a long time, which suggests, John, that he is perhaps retired from this race.
He has indeed, and I can't help but think that yes, that is a death knell to his race. Certainly it also Ring Meter saw that he just really didn't get on with the wet conditions at all, and I believe he also retired from that one. So yeah, perhaps that Mazda just not particularly favourable in these conditions. As you alluded to, the 350Zs seem to be struggling the most out of the GT500 cars, and they are the only the only cars in that class that run turbochargers. So it's possible that while in the dry, that means that they're very good at getting off the corners. In the wet, it does just mean that it's very difficult to control that amount of sort of sudden increase in torque as you accelerate.
Now, in terms of Pfeffer, does he get points if he's did not finish the race? I'm guessing he doesn't. So could we see perhaps Pfeffer come out again in the last 5 minutes to get the classification, to get the points on the board?
It's done by a 70% rule. So basically, any car that completes 70% of the laps, or 70% or more, I should say, of the laps of the car that wins that class, then they get scored. So it doesn't actually matter if they don't cross the line when the race finishes. But certainly, having retired this early on, I think Pfeffer is unlikely to get there.
Well, that amazes me with Pfeffer, because looking at the championship standings, with Philo on 20 points and his other nearest rival there second on 20 points, with a 5-point difference, even if Pfeffer finished bottom of the table, 4th overall, that would still give him enough points to close up on his championship kind of battle in front.
Yes, indeed. I guess he's just a testament to the fact that at the end of the day, Gran Turismo is a recreational activity, and perhaps there are more important things than championship results, such as not putting yourself through 90 minutes of pain if you're just really not having that much fun.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, people do come on to Gran Turismo to have fun, and if he's obviously not enjoying his time behind the wheel, so to say, then that might be a reason why he's decided to retire from this race. Future F1 still leading the way. Second for Glenhouse 81, third for TNR Zigan, fourth for TNR Rebellion, but leading in the GT300 category, it is Bambi, currently leading there in the GT300 category. There he is now, had a great strong race in the 4-wheel drive Subaru Impreza. He'll love it if the rain keeps coming, because he seems to be the strongest of the GT300 runners in the rain so far, so he's enjoying the conditions so far. Perhaps doesn't want them to change one bit. Behind him we got Jink, the German driver, there in second position in class. Cobra, however, has closed up quite considerably, so could this perhaps be an attack for Cobra here to try and steal second position in the GT300 standing, as of course Cobra cannot actually score points here this afternoon due to the fact he is a reserve driver in that Lexus IS 350. However, he could still give it a good go indeed and try and get past Jink for the honour and pride of doing so here this afternoon. But this definitely looks to be the most interesting battle on track at the moment, as the car's stabilising and getting ready for that final push during the last 15 and 20 minutes, which will ultimately decide victory here this afternoon.
Yes, indeed. It certainly seems Cobra is the man on the mission at the moment. Jinx certainly seems to be struggling more than the Swedish driver, and possibly due to the difference in cars. Certainly the Gaiara, I believe, is slightly lighter than the Lexus, so that obviously makes it slightly more twitchy in the wet as we see him running almost off the circuit there.
Yeah, Jinx ran on the grass, didn't quite turn into the corner and just ran off wide there. Sorry, John, as that happened. And Cobra there jumped up into second position to take second in the GT300 class, 6th overall in the overall results here this afternoon. However, Bambi had lapped the field by 1, if not 2 laps, which suggests that Cobra's best position will come for second in class today. That's if, of course, Bambi doesn't make a mistake and has to pit himself or even retire from the race with still 29 minutes to go and still on 99% surface water level. It could perhaps be the case. However, Bambi, it appears, John, has wrapped this race up. Cobra and Jink battling away there for second and third, and now here comes Bambi, funny enough to say that, coming through to lap the field once again there as he gets tail happy indeed coming out of turn number 1 in the 4-wheel drive Subaru Impreza.
Yes, indeed, he certainly does seem to be the class of the field, and I think given one of the TNR cars is flying, he may actually have almost the fastest pace of anyone on the circuit at the moment. So really a stunning drive from Bambi. Obviously he does have that advantage of the car or in these conditions, but certainly given how treacherous we've seen them be, it is still an impressive drive nonetheless.
Well, Bambi's performance here today then definitely showing he might even be the fastest car on the track regardless of the GT300 status. Brings us back to what happened in round 2 of the championship, of course. TNR Filo victorious in the GT300 category. However, his performance that day actually got him an overall podium, beating Future F1 to that podium spot. So it definitely shows that the GT300 drivers can perform better sometimes than the GT500 drivers in the right conditions, and that's definitely what we saw at the Autumn Ring, and we're definitely seeing it again here this afternoon. Right, Zegan into the pits from 3rd position, so Rebellion will go past him expectantly and jump into 4th, but saying that, no he won't, because Rebellion is still at the hairpin at turn number 8 as Zegan exits the pit lane. So yes, John, Rebellion's pit stops have cost him, and this doesn't look like he's on course for the victory here this afternoon. Look, he's battling himself with Future F1, who just come across to lap. Surely that's not him to lap TNR Rebellion, the race leader for an hour or so of this race. And in fact, no, Rebellion's coming in again. I think, John, that is the end of TNR Rebellion's chance of the victory this afternoon. Zegan's lying in 3rd, which means the battle for the GT500 victory today is surely between Future F1, who had that pit stop strategy mistake early on where it looked he had thrown the race away, and Glenhouse, who's kept his head down, put the laps in, and still let perhaps win a chance of victory this afternoon. As we can see there, Glenhouse going through turn number 1, as Future F1 is going through turn number 4. That's only about a straight distance, so it definitely looks as if the battle for victory today between these two drivers.
Yes, indeed. The gap between these two has stayed relatively similar throughout these conditions, so while it seems that Glenn can hold on to Future F1, he hasn't actually gained particularly over the H. Ooh, as we see him, actually I can't tell, that may well have just been latency, but certainly as we see Jink, the GT300 driver, having a big mishap there, almost getting collected by Glenn, but the GT500 car managing to avoid him. Yes, certainly it seems that in these conditions the Lexus and the HSV are really a rock and a hard place really, and they just can't really gain over each other.
Well, in terms of they seem to, just as you said, John, have this kind of stable relationship between each other. Again, neither team really gaining on that lap, so surely then, if there is this kind of equilibrium between the two cars, then all Future F1 has to do is keep it clean and not make a mistake to grab victory here this afternoon and continue his run of all podiums during the Super GT series. Just as we said right at the start of the race, what was happening to Future F1? Why is he not battling for the podium? He comes out and seemingly is odds on this afternoon to grab a race victory in round 4 of the Super GT here at the Tsukuba circuit. One of the new drivers to Tsukuba, of course, taking part in the Nürburgring 24 hours. This series helping him develop his driving skills before that main event happening in February time. So definitely worth watching him. He's definitely a new talent to the Tsukuba rostrum, and he's definitely showing his performance in the Super GT Championship. Podiums throughout the rest of the rounds, podiums at the Auto Ring, podiums at Tokyo, podiums in the first round of the series, and of course he looks odds on, John, to take victory in round 4 this afternoon.
He certainly does, and as we've discussed, while it's not a huge victory he has over, or advantage I should say, he has over Glenn Ells, it is indeed an advantage, and at this moment in time it's hard to think that any other driver is really the best bet. As we see, Bambi has indeed passed TNR Rebellion, who I believe has now retired the car. If we just check how many laps he's done 65 laps, which means that I believe he's actually right on 70% distance as far as race prediction goes. So it may well be that he is, much like TNR Pfeffer, just had enough of these conditions, but unlike his GT300 stablemate, just has soldiered on in order to get into a point scoring position before retiring the car.
Pfeffer's not going to score the points, so why hasn't he just quit the lobby and turned off his PlayStation 3?
Oh, I suppose he's desperately hoping that it might still dry out. Obviously, cars go a lot quicker around the track in the dry than they do in the wet, so time spent running in the dry does actually mean that you don't have to run 70% of the time to get 70% of the laps, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Whereas TNR Rebellion is hoping it stays wet so he can get on that podium. Of course, Ziggin is just in front of him in 3rd position. Rebellion there will finish 4th in the GT500 category, meaning actually Ziggin, who looked as if he would lose throughout this race, will actually gain 1 more point in the championship and will go 24 points to Rebellion's 22 points if it stays like this. Future F1 will gain some points on Ziggin, 2 points on Ziggin, meaning actually Future F1 will still be a long way back in the championship. And it seems as if the championship so far, a 2-horse race then between Ziggin and Rebellion, but we've still got 4 more races after this, and if Future F1 keeps developing and keeps nabbing these race victories off the 2 TNR boys, then perhaps Future F1 could be someone to watch throughout the second half of the season.
Yes, indeed, as well as rumours of a balance of performance update at the season midpoint coming soon. It does mean that perhaps the TNR boys' run of dominance might not be as easy to continue in the second half of this series.
Well, looking at the GT300 class now, we've got Bambi. He's moved up into 4th position due to TNR Rebellion's mishap. So Bambi on course for the win today, but saying that, very wide there coming out of turn number 9. He's just coming through now to get past Future F1. Future F1 has got some laps on him, so this is not for the track condition today, just for the pride of overtaking the overall leader. And this sums up our theory just a bit earlier on about Bambi being the fastest driver on track, because he seems to be unlapping himself from the current overall race leader.
Yeah, I think Future is very slowly pulling away, but certainly in the traction zone you can really see the advantage that Bambi has with those that four-wheel drivetrain. Certainly in the corners and towards the end of the straights, Future's advantage is obvious, but he really is doing a stunning job in that GT300 car in comparison to the performance deficit he has from the class above.
Right, Future F1 currently in the lead of this race. Glenel's in 2nd, Ziggin there in 3rd, Bambi there in 4th, leader of the GT300 category. There is Future F1 now coming through to lap Jink again, and so will Bambi in time as well. Jink currently lying 3rd in the GT300 category, quite a way off Cobra it appears. So it appears actually, John, it's all quite stable out there. No drivers making a move. It seems that Future F1 on course for the GT500 victory. Bambi, we've known for quite a while, is on course for the GT300 victory. It appears as if the race has pretty much been decided, still with 20 minutes to go. However, if the wet weather stops and we get some dry running, is Glenhouse going to be a threat to future F1's potential race victory here this afternoon?
Well, I think Glenhouse is still a threat to future F1 even in these conditions. Certainly the HSV driver is only a single mistake away from basically the barriers, which are all fairly close around here. And with Glenn as close as he is, it would literally be just a single small mistake that could cost him the victory here. So I think these two are just watching the stopwatch really and just trying to make up any difference that they can, just to play mind games with their opposition as much as actually gain track time really.
Well, definitely in terms of future F1, now surely he can just kind of take it off the gas a bit, just make sure he finishes his race, because he's got the advantage for Glenhouse. But by doing that, he could put himself at a small disadvantage, because Glenhouse himself will be going gung-ho to try and gain the time on future F1, but by pushing himself, he could lead to a mistake which puts Glenhouse in that race-winning position. So a lot of psychology here then between the drivers to try and find the quickest and safest way around a monsoon-like Tsukuba circuit here this afternoon. Of course, if you've enjoyed what you've seen here this afternoon, you can head over to our Facebook page, Core, where we'll have our full updates on the rest of the Core series, including, of course, the Core VLN, the Core Nürburgring 24 hours, which is taking place in February to March 2015, and of course all the updates on the Core Super GT. You can of course head over to the website www.coreonlineracing.wix.com. That's www.coreonlineracing.wix.com. So make sure you get in touch with us, comment on the video below to tell us what you thought of the Super GT series, who you think will be successful next time out, and who you think will hold the championship for the 2014-15 Super GT Championship. We'd love to hear your opinions. Of course, if you're interested in getting involved in Core, then there are a variety of ways to do so. Just comment on one of the videos below. Make sure that you head over to the website, comment on the Facebook page. We'd love to have you part of the Core group, whether as a driver in some of the series we offer, or alternatively being someone in the background, a cameraman, a commentator like us. It'll be good to develop part of the Core team, and you can watch some fantastic racing like we've seen here this afternoon at the Tsukuba circuit, a race in which future F1 appears just 17 minutes away to gain his first win of the 2014-15 Core Super GT season.
Yes, indeed, and as we were discussing previously, the mind games that are played between drivers as they go out, certainly Future has the advantage at this moment, because obviously he has the race lead. All Glenn can really do now is sort of push as hard as he can in terms of outright performance, just to try and convince Future that he himself has to up his pace in order to not lose the victory. Other than that, there's not really a lot that Glenn can do, just because Future knows that if the gap stays the same as it is, then he's got the win. So all Glenn can do really is just convince Future that he needs to push harder and try and force him into a mistake without making one of his own, which is never an easy thing to do. Looking back down the field again, we see GTP Bambi and that four-wheel drive Super Inventor, really easily the most stable car out there at the moment, it seems, and he really does seem to be making the most of that performance advantage at the moment.
Yep, Bambi definitely showing some good form here this afternoon. John definitely on course for that GT300 victory. There's Cobra coming in second in the GT300 class. The Swedish driver was actually bottom of that GT300 class earlier on, but has capitalised from the mistakes of those around him and has managed to rise up and gain second here in this afternoon's race. Of course, Bambi can't score points because he's a reserve driver, neither can Cobra, meaning Jink, who's actually not sort of made too many big mistakes here this afternoon, will gain a podium here in the GT300 category. His first podium of the series, and he'll gain the full 8 points to close up on his rivals. Jink before this race currently bottom of the GT300 Championship, just 3 points. However, this result will put him up there ahead of Frutaga, ahead of David, and just 4 points off Pfeffer in 4th position in the championship. So a good run today by Jink, with Pfeffer not being able to finish and the cars around him not competing here this afternoon.
Yes, certainly Jink is on his way to get really the best result imaginable, since he's going to score the maximum possible points without a single one of his competitors scoring any for this round. So really a huge gain for him at this moment in time.
Yeah, so a great result there for Jink in that one. There is Egan behind third, currently on the road in the GT500 category. There is Glenhouse currently in second place, still hunting down Future F1 in front. In fact, that gap appears to have closed a bit, John, because if that's Future coming out
I think the gap has actually got a lot bigger.
Yeah, sorry, I thought that was Future just up the road on the driver tracker, but Future coming out of turn number 8, when that gap is considerable indeed. So it appears, as long as it's as long as it's just a small mistake for Future, he might have enough to still sort of stay out in front. As if Future makes a massive mistake that will result in a pit stop, that's when Glenhouse will still stand a chance of victory in this afternoon's race. But with Future knowing he's got that big gap, and with 13.5 minutes to go in this race, surely he's got to be taking it slightly easier. Surely he's got to be just braking a bit gentler through the corners, just nursing the car home to make sure he doesn't make those mistakes and gets the full points and the victory here this afternoon.
Yes, I think certainly now the gap has got big enough that Future really can afford to relax slightly. And certainly, yeah, I think the mind games we were discussing earlier, that Glenn has now lost that battle effectively, since, or looking at his driving style, it seems that he's making a lot of small errors, and while it's not costing him massive amounts per lap, it is still costing him time compared to Future F1. Driving in the wet, unlike driving in the dry, is basically all about self-restraint, so you have to just drive as absolutely smoothly as possible. You don't ever want to get you want to try and minimise the amount of leery slides you do, just because that's all time that you're then missing out on as far as your position goes. So yeah, certainly Future F1 is playing the game a lot better at the moment than Glenhouse is.
Yep, and as their cars make their way around the lap once again, then, as we can see, this is the bit that seems to have caught some of the drivers out of this sweeping left-hand corner there at turn 6 and turn 7. A few cars having some incidents there early on when they were getting used to the wet conditions. However, now, John, we've had the wet weather for about nearly an hour. The drivers perhaps now just feeling quite comfortable with the wet conditions. They know where their braking points are. They know where the incidents could arise, and because they're suited to it, we're not seeing as many mistakes that we did earlier on, because the drivers now getting used to the conditions. They've got their tyres in gear, and now it's all about keeping it clean until the checkered flag in 11 minutes 45 seconds time.
Yes, indeed, and certainly obviously the more practice that you get, the better you get at doing things. And as I alluded to, driving fast in the wet is all about knowing exactly where the limit is, so you don't overstep it. In the dry, you can get away with sort of a lot more experimentation without necessarily losing the same amount of lap times you do in the wet. But certainly many of the drivers we know compete in several series, so it could well be that many of them just haven't had the time to really practice for a wet setup.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, the Super GT being a big part now of the core package, now that the main event for core, really, the World Endurance Championship, has finished. However, we still got, of course, the VLN happening, the Nürburgring 24 hours coming up. So these drivers, of course, focusing on multiple core series, and with the VLN and Nürburgring 24 hours still having kind of preference over the series, perhaps the drivers more kind of knowledgeable with the Nürburgring Nordschleife circuit, more knowledgeable with their Nürburgring 24-hour cars, and therefore perhaps they haven't had as much chance to kind of develop this track in the wet conditions, drive the circuit with the cars. So perhaps the practice not as kind of concise, as we'll see in the Nürburgring 24 Hours and the VLM, which really is sort of the main aim for these drivers. So perhaps that's why we saw the mistakes a bit earlier on. Some of these drivers perhaps new to these cars on this circuit, on this particular day in history. Of course, this circuit has been a big part of Gran Turismo. I think from Gran Turismo 4 on the PlayStation 2, this game has been included. So a big part of Gran Turismo, however, not often used in the core package. In fact, I believe this is the first time in my kind of core commentary career that I've visited the Tsukuba circuit, so it's not really often used in the core package, and therefore these drivers perhaps not having much experience with its layout, with these cars, with these conditions. But now, of course, having an hour's of wet running by their belt, they'll be able to continue on and hopefully have a clean end to this race.
Yes, indeed, this is one of the more obscure circuits, and often, as you mentioned, disregarded due to the sort of very small and technical nature, but yet hidden within that is actually a track that does require a lot of skill and practice to be able to get right every lap, and certainly because it's so short, you have to do it, or every lap you do a lot of times, if you know what I mean. The next race is in 2 weeks' time, or from the moment this video goes live, so it won't be the next weekend, but it will be the weekend afterwards, where we'll get to see the cars taking on, I believe, the Suzuka circuit. Actually, that may be incorrect. Give me 2 moments, and I'll just confirm this.
Well, definitely, and of course, with the VLN happening sort of around the same time as well, these drivers won't perhaps have as much time to go out there and practice around these circuits and practice around that circuit with these cars on that layout, because they're focused on their VLN series as well. So perhaps it's not as important to them as the VLN series that's currently taking place. Of course, the next round taking place at the Fuji Super Speedway, so that's definitely worth keeping your eye out for in about 2 weeks' time. So it gives the drivers and teams 2 more weeks to prepare their cars for that one, 2 more weeks for Rebellion and Pfeffer to work out what went wrong here this afternoon and how they can improve that heading into the second half of the season which includes some legendary circuits, of course, just as John mentioned, the Suzuka circuit being part of this second half of the season. So make sure you stay tuned to the Core Facebook page, to the Core website, and to Core TV here on YouTube to make sure that you don't miss the full coverage of the second half of the Super GT season. We've also got live streaming of some of those races as well across the Core commentator team. So make sure that you stay tuned for all of that information heading up to the second half of this highly entertaining Core Super GT series.
Yes, and not forgetting that the Nürburgring 24 you mentioned previously is actually tied in with this series. The final round will be at the Nürburgring GP circuit on the morning of that race as one of the build-up events. So yeah, certainly a heavy schedule for many of the drivers competing here and in the Nürburgring 24. Especially, it has to be said, for Glenn Alls, who is actually part of a 2-man team, Reaper Racing. So driving duties in the morning and splitting about 24 hours of driving with 2 people. So yeah, big day for Glenn.
Big day for Glenn, and then his internet provider decided to shut off his internet that day. Then that scuppers his plans for the entire weekend.
Well, we have to hope that something like that doesn't happen, but yes, certainly we've seen many people suffering from disconnections and other technical issues. It seems that Freisiggen is actually closing on Glenn Alls, but I'm not sure if he's a lap down. Let's just take a brief look at the time screen, but no, he is actually closing down on the Lexus ahead of him. So
yeah, it's only a 26-second gap there, and it's 2 seconds a lap difference with 9 minutes to go. However, he's going to run out of time, surely.
Sorry, my controller just vacating the desk. The gap's actually 3 seconds due to that being listed as back to the leader.
Yeah, so that's the gap to the leader, yeah. Apologies for that one. If that gap is 3.2-ish seconds, when with definitely, if he's closing 2 seconds a lap, with 5 minutes to go, Ziggin is definitely in contention against second in this race. Of course, a move that TNR Rebellion will not want to happen, because it means that Zigon will actually go. Let's work this one out. We'll go about 3 points ahead of Rebellion in the championship standings. That is, of course, if Rebellion does gain points for completing 70% of the laps. Him having retired, of course, on lap number 67. So he's only missed 20 or so laps. So I think he should be included in that record. Of course, that should be the case. I think we're going to get out our calculators in the studio and try and work out whether he will be included in those race results, because of course if he has missed the cut in that one, then Zigon is going to gain 7 points and will be leading the championship by around about 8 points. So it's definitely a key move that, if Rebellion has got wrong, could really scupper his championship hopes for the 2014-15 season. Zigon now coming through turn number 1. He's still got to close the gap, however, between him and Glenhouse, and of course catching up is one thing, but overtaking is quite another. Glenhouse won't want to let that position go, and with 3.5 minutes left, the Zigon to close up and then pass Glenhouse, it could be a very bold move indeed, especially in these treacherous conditions that we're seeing this afternoon, John.
Indeed, and from a back of the envelope scribble, I believe that so long as Future F1 doesn't complete 96 laps, as long as he only completes 95, then Rebellion has done enough to be scored.
So if he does 5 laps in the next 3 minutes, which won't be possible, then that is absolutely fine. Well, saying that, actually, he can do 4 laps comfortably in the next 3 minutes or so if it's about 50 seconds a lap. So it'll be interesting to see how he does that. There is Future F1 currently still leading the way. Glenhouse hasn't been able to really close up on Future F1, and now with, of course, Zigon behind him, that gap, it appears, will stay just like it is, and Future F1 then on course to take its first victory in the 2014-15 Core Super GT Championship, his 4th podium of the season. Definitely want to watch his Future F1, a new driver, of course, to the core package, taking part in the Nürburgring 24 hours, so you can see him in that one as well. And of course, he'll be definitely someone to watch in the second half of the season. This victory will pull Zigon within about 6 or 7 points then to Rebellion, and only about 10 points behind Zigon himself. So this result for him will definitely perhaps be a catalyst to a good second half of the season, which could see Future F1 challenging the likes of Zigon and Rebellion in front, and could perhaps seriously push on for a 2014-15 title push. But definitely worth then sticking around to see if he can do that in the second half of the Super GT Championship, the 5th round of which taking place in just 2 weeks' time from the Fuji Super Speedway in Japan. Definitely worth sticking around for that one, John.
Indeed. Yeah, certainly Fuji is a track that really does combine 2 very diverse driving or setup requirements. First of all, there's obviously that enormous back straight really does reward having a car set up for high speed, but contrary to that, there are lots of sort of sustained high speed corners that really need the downforce for you to run at optimum speed there, so it will be a difficult choice for many of the teams. Certainly we've seen at Matigi many of the teams favouring lower downforce setups just to get that straight line speed, and certainly with the sort of comparatively high downforce of these cars, many have said similar to LMP2, and yet so little horsepower in effect compared to the modern prototypes, it does mean that sacrificing downforce is a lot more commonplace than we've seen in series such as the WEC, such as Nürburgring 24, just because these cars are capable of producing so much.
Well, Future F1, he comes across the line now. We're still 33 seconds on the clock, so this will be the penultimate lap, it seems, meaning that 93 laps will be completed, because of course one was the warm-up lap, meaning Rebellion, it appears, has just managed to stay in the results by the skin of his teeth, and he will gain results of finishing 5th overall in the GT500 class, a result which will give him, let's work this one out, about 4 points in the championship, so he won't lose that many points to Ziggin himself. Right then, John, who is your driver of the day? First of all in the GT500 category, then in the GT300 category, as the timer runs out.
I think Future F1 is definitely a strong candidate for GT500, but I'm tempted to actually say 5 Ziggin, just because he's definitely not had the best race with that early contact, then a subsequent event with TNR Pfeffer that have really scuppered his chances slightly, and clearly the fact that he hasn't got the best car for these conditions. I think he's
taken the checkered flag, yeah, John. Yeah, he has taken the checkered flag.
Yes, no, he wasn't.
Yeah, so Future F1
crashing.
Victorious in round 4 of the Super GT at the Tsukuba circuit. His first victory in the 2014-15 season, his 4th podium overall. Second to across the line is Glenhouse 81. He couldn't quite close back up to Future F1. Ziggin will come across the line in 3rd. He looked as if he could close up on Glenhouse, but it wasn't the case, unfortunately. Right, sorry to cut across to you then, John. Back to you, your driver of the day for this afternoon's race.
So yeah, I think my vote actually goes for TNR 5 Ziggin, as he has just crashed across the line in a similar vein to Future F1 did. Possibly the FI would have words with them about that. But yes, so I think 5 Ziggin just for sticking out really and making the best of a bad situation. And then I think in GT300, while Bambi has had the absolute pace of the field, I think Cobra 75, just for managing, or for not necessarily being the most experienced driver in these cars, but still managing to do the best of the rear-wheel drive cars, definitely deserves a commendation for that.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Ziggin as well for the driver of the day today in the GT500 category, because he managed to come back from issues, come back from that multi-car collision we saw, and managed to get the points on the board in that one. But my driver of the day for the GT300 category, in my eyes, has to go to Bambi. He managed to come back from nowhere. He is a reserve driver, so he doesn't perhaps know the series as well as the drivers around him. He's shown some great promise throughout the course of the race today, and definitely could be one, if he came back in the series again, to really challenge for race victories. Right then, unfortunately, that is all we have time for, but don't forget to join us in 2 weeks' time from the Fuji Super Speedway for round 5 of the Super GT Championship. It's been a day of fantastic action here at the Tsukuba circuit, but it's not the TNR boys on top. Instead, it was victory today for Future F1. Thank you very much for joining us, John.
Yes, thank you for having me, Luke. Indeed,
right.
Join us in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, definitely worth it. Until next time, however, from us in the commentary box here at the Tsukuba circuit, goodbye for now.